Hello, AP Langers. It's Mrs. West with a note regarding your summer reading assignment. If you haven't started it yet, this might be a good time to do so. I know there's some confusion of what it should look like, so I thought I would send this out to try to clear that up. First, get a copy of the book if you haven't done so already. You'll see the copy right here. This is the version you should have. While reading the book, please take notes in the margins and on the text itself. Write right into the book. We will be checking this on the first day of school. These notes that you're making are called annotations, and I'll give you an example of that in just a moment. Also, while reading, on a separate piece of paper, you should be keeping a journal. There should be 9 pages in this journal, 1 page per section outlined in your assignment. You'll see the breakdown of pages there. In these journal entries, this is going to serve as analysis of what you've read. Not necessarily a summary of what you read, but rather some analysis. And again, I'll give you an example in a few moments. In your annotations and in your analysis, please try to use some of the advanced placement language and composition vocabulary. The vocabulary we'd like you to focus on is listed in the assignment. This is some of the most common vocabulary used on the test as well as in the class, so it's very important to become familiar with it now. On the opening day of school, you'll be taking a 40-minute timed writing with a prompt that's in the same format as the AP Lang and Composition test. It's still undecided whether or not your journal and book will be available to you during this timed writing, but please note that the journal itself needs to be turned in with the timed writing on the first day of school. And with that, let's get into some more details. Okay, so what's the purpose in doing a summer reading assignment? Well, 1, most advanced placement classes do that. 2, it creates a familiar text that all of us have read together, something that at any point when an example wants to be given, or an analogy wants to be made, or a reference needs to be used, we all have a common one that we can use together. Thirdly, it becomes an introduction to Soapstone. Soapstone is one of the many reading strategies we will use to comprehend text more clearly. This will get us into the practice of using that. It's not something that necessarily just snaps into our brains. It's something that we need to train our brains to do. 4th, we practice an annotation. The idea of actually writing back to the author in the moment of reading so that there's a conversation going on with the text, not just ingesting text. We also want to be able to cover some of the frequently used advanced placement language vocabulary. This vocabulary is extremely important, especially when it comes to understanding what the AP prompts are asking, as well as being able to interpret some of the multiple choice questions. And finally, to be quite honest, it's an introduction to what we expect in the class. What kind of studying and habits you want to get into practice now. Okay, let's get down to it. How do we annotate? As you can see on the assignment, there are 3 categories to annotations. 1 is marking the text using notations, 2 is writing in the margins, and 3 is reading it a second time and making more notes. Okay, so first, when I'm marking up a text, I'm going to circle words that I don't know. I'm going to underline words that I think are especially powerful. I'm going to put brackets around sections or passages that I really like the style of or the flow of, or I think have a specific meaning. I use lines and arrows to connect back to something previously said or done, or question marks if I don't get it. Those question marks become really important because in classroom discussions then you can look at your question marks and know what you wanted to ask about and remind yourself of that kind of stuff. But with these notations, they only work if you write down what you're thinking, and that's where number 2, writing comments in the margin, becomes especially important. So if you circle a word you don't know, write the definition in the margin. If you underline a key word or phrase, put down why you did that. Maybe you want to number the paragraphs so that you can reference them quicker. Maybe you want to restate the main idea of a paragraph if it's very dense or confusing so that you remind yourself. This works only when you're actively engaged with the text and talking back to what you're reading in front of you. Let me show you an example. Alright, kiddies, turn to page 29. The beloved objects that we carried with us from place to place were now left behind in the wagon, and with them, finally, our illusions. Every few yards there stood an SS man, his machine gun trained on us. Hand in hand we followed the throng. An SS came toward us wielding a club. He commanded, men to the left, women to the right. 8 words spoken quietly, indifferently, without emotion. 8 simple, short words, yet that was the moment when I left my mother. There was no time to think, and I already felt my father's hand press against mine. We were alone. In a fraction of a second, I could see my mother, my sisters, move to the right. Tispora was holding Mother's hand. I saw them walking farther and farther away. Mother was stroking my sister's blonde hair as if to protect her. And I walked on with my father, with the men. I didn't know that this was the moment in time and place where I'd be leaving my mother and Tispora forever. I kept walking with my father, holding my hand. Hopefully you've heard some of the tone come through as I read it, where I put emphasis, where I put pauses to create meaning and more effect. That only comes with practice and reading aloud. But you can also accomplish that through annotations. Let me show you. Please keep in mind everyone's annotations are going to look different. What you connect to in a text and what makes meaning for you in a text is going to be different from person to person to person, and that's absolutely fine. When grading this, what we're going to be looking for is more effort than anything else. Are you having a conversation with the text? So for example, in this one, I really love the first line of this. I remember earlier in the book when he talks about the warnings and the signs of something horrific coming and how people didn't want to believe something that bad could occur. And now their illusions are finally being realized. And the fact that he states we, and that's not just him, he's including a massive group of people, including his immediate family as well as strangers around him, as this collective we of the only we have left. Yet we still have that contrast with alone later in that page where it says we were alone. I find it amazing that a person can feel so lonely in such a large group of people. I can't remember what the exact count was, how many were in that train car, but there were so many, yet he felt like he was isolated, even with his father holding his hand. That's got to be a huge, empty, hollow, horrible feeling in the pit of your stomach. I also really enjoy the writing style of the 8 words spoken quietly and differently and without emotion. Such a simple sentence for such a grave consequence. 8 simple, short words. And if I count it correctly, he does it in 7, not 8. But you get my drift. At the end of this paragraph, I do enjoy the holding, walking, stroking, holding, leaving, these ing kind of words that give a lot of movement to what's happening, and we can feel the things being pulled apart because the ing is separating, yet it's being repeated, and it creates this stronger image of stronger image and tone of anxiety of separation. We're all having this happen to us, yet we're all alone in having it happen to us as well. Soapstone is a reading strategy. It's meant to give you purpose behind how you're reading something to get something more than just the obvious out of the text. It takes practice. This is not something we're accustomed to doing all the time, putting these terms to it. Soapstone stands for subject, occasion, audience, purpose, speaker, and tone. The subject, your general topic. Your occasion is when and how it's being said. The audience, who is it being said to? The purpose is why it's being said at all. The speaker is who's saying the message, and the tone is not just the attitude of the speaker, but the rhythm of how he or she is saying it to the reader as well. The tone part is the most commonly used part on the advanced placement test, so please become extremely familiar with that. All the preceding ideas kind of contribute to that tone, and what you're looking for in tone too is when it changes. Your most common tone words are going to be your emotionally charged words, and it becomes more complex as those emotions change. Okay, so here's my soapstone. Please keep in mind that I'm doing this based on one page, so it's not very in-depth, but you can get the idea from it. So the subject of this section is the introduction to concentration camp life, and the occasion is that arrival on the first night he gets there, and his very first introduction to what life is going to be like now for a while. His audience here is not other members of the Jewish faith, but rather anyone outside of it who find it so unbelievable that this even occurred. The purpose is to show the heartbreak of the separation of his family. And it also gives him a chance to reflect back on this being the last time he sees the female members of his immediate family. At the moment, he probably didn't realize that because to some extent he didn't understand what was going on. But in writing, he's able to reflect back and remember more closely. The speaker, he speaks as if he's part of a group or the spokesman for a large group, yet we also know based on some of his word choices that he's very alone in that same moment. And because of all those things, the tone of this passage is quite anxious and quite unnerving and quite unsettling and very sad. Now, can everybody's soapstone analysis be a little bit different? Absolutely. What you connect to is going to be different from one person to the next. Here I tried to zoom in so you could see how I wrote it. I actually wrote mine right into the book. But again, this isn't a requirement. You can put it anywhere you want as long as you're able to connect it back to the section that you're reading to remind yourself of what you got out of it. Alright, here's my big risk. This might be a journal entry I could use. Again, keep in mind I'm basing this strictly on one page out of the book, but this could be a sample of your analysis. So I write, the first line, the beloved objects, may be some of the most powerful words Vazel writes. The objects he speaks of include both physical and mental, however they finally realize the reality of the situation which he seems to have known all along. And again, I know this because of some of the word choice, and I might add that to my analysis, that some of his word choice and vocabulary used throughout the story, or some of his choices in which flashbacks he gives us, leads me to that realization. And a strong visual and tactile image of his mother stroking his sister's hair and walking away from them increased the tension and anxious tone of the passage. He states there is no time to think, yet the image is so strong in his writing and mind of that final moment. So there's a very short one-paragraph analysis of that first page. We expect you to write a full page. Please do not give us a lump on that page. At this point in writing, you should know how to break up paragraphs. So as you change ideas, please change paragraphs. If you want your analysis to follow the soapstone method and write a short paragraph about each step of the soapstone, that's acceptable too. Just make sure you make the connections and explain what you're saying. Hopefully this has cleared up some of the confusion with the assignment. Please refer to the blog, and you can see the web address here, to be able to find other questions and answers that have occurred. As I get emails, I'm answering them and then trying to post them on the blog so that if you have the same question, you can see how I'm responding. Again, you have our email addresses. You can contact either of us for any type of feedback that you want. We'll be more than welcome to take it in. Any questions, please ask. I hope you enjoy the remainder of your summer, and we'll see you in a few weeks. Can't wait.